Welcome to Talk Across America. I'm Doug Miles, and we're here in beautiful Sarasota, Florida. And joining us on our Book Talk segment, we have the author. Very interesting book. Involves small-town politics, zoos, animals, and the great Johnny Carson. It all comes together in a very interesting story. It's called Zoo, Nebraska, the Dismantling of an American Dream. We're joined today by Carson Vaughan, who actually grew up out in Nebraska, so he knows what he's talking about, and he joined us by telephone today. Carson, good to talk with you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Doug. Thanks. How are you?
I'm great. I had a chance to visit Nebraska once. A college buddy of mine moved out there for dental, to work actually at the University of Nebraska as a dentist. So it's a nice part of the country. I have to get back there.
Very good, yeah.
Lincoln area he lives.
That's right.
Beautiful part of the country. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on when they offered with the book, because I didn't ever heard of this particular zoo before, but what a wild story it is. I guess it's something you knew about from being there, or how did you get involved with the story?
Well, it's strange. I actually, even though I grew up in another small town just 3 hours west of Royal, I had never heard of Zoo, Nebraska growing up, and I didn't even know Royal was a town until I started writing the book. I happened to be dating a girl from nearby Royal when I was a senior in college, and we drove through the town of Royal one day when she was, showing me that part of the state, and she pointed her thumb out the window one day and just said, "Oh, hey, that's where Reuben got shot." And I had no idea who Reuben was, or that Reuben was a chimpanzee, or that there was a zoo there. And even as we were driving through it, I didn't even know that we were in town. Royal is only 81 people and was so small that I thought we were just passing by like a farm or some sort of ag development there, But it was a town called Royal, and it had this strange saga of the zoo behind it.
I guess every state has towns like that, right? In somewhere outside the cities, but the Midwest seems to have a lot of them like that, and this really had a great story behind it. Let's get into it a little bit. We don't want to give away too much. We want people to read the book, but it involves someone who brought back chimpanzees from, I guess, was it Diane Fossey's original group, I guess, in Africa?
Well, sort
do
of.
I have that right?
Well, not quite. So what happened was there was a man named Dick Haskin from Royal who had always dreamed of working with great apes in the wild, so he went off to the university, cobbled together kind of something close to a primatology degree, ended up working at the Lincoln Children's Zoo, and then was finally offered an assistantship with Diane Fossey in Rwanda to work with mountain gorillas. And right before he was set to go over there, she was murdered in Rwanda, and so then that's when Dick's life pivoted in strange ways, and he ended up getting custodianship of a chimpanzee at the Children's Zoo and taking it back home to Royal with him, and starting what he called the Midwest Primate Research Center, which at the time was just Dick and his single chimpanzee in a donated trailer home.
Hey, you talk about in the book about Dick Haskin really dedicating himself to this project, almost to, I guess, definitely to an extreme, right? I mean, it affected his health, didn't it? I mean, he really didn't have much money coming in at all.
No, he was fighting tooth and nail the whole time the zoo was open to just keep it above water financially. He also, ironically, had always hated zoos and hated seeing animals caged. And so he ended up sort of entrapping himself in kind of his worst nightmare.
Johnny Carson, of course, everybody remembers from The Tonight Show, from Nebraska, grew up there, and he plays an interesting part to this story because he gave money to this Midwest Primate Center, right? A lot of money.
Yeah, that's right. He played a small but pretty significant role in that. The zoo should have closed on multiple occasions and didn't, because at the last minute they would reach out to Johnny Carson and say, "Hey, we need help," and he would help them. Even though he had never seen the facilities there in Royal, he would send a check for $55,000 or another $20,000, and that doesn't sound like a ton of money, but given the zoo's budget, that was a ton of money for them. It allowed them to keep open the doors for so many years longer. And so, it's fair to say that had Johnny Carson not donated money to this zoo, it would not have reached 2005, which meant that, they wouldn't have gotten to the point where 4 chimpanzees could have gotten loose and, ransacked the town a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Now, Johnny Carson, known as being, kind of hard to get a hold of, how did these people get a hold of Johnny at that time? I guess it was toward the end of his run on The Tonight Show, right? Maybe it was after. Was he had already retired? Yeah.
He retired about halfway through, I think. So the zoo had been open a few years when he was still on air, and then he left. But strangely, I'm not totally sure how it happened. I just know that the secretary at the zoo wrote to whatever fan mail address they had for Johnny Carson, and off it went, and somehow they got a call in return not long after, and he was willing to donate. I think certainly it was a big factor in that Johnny Carson had been raised in nearby Norfolk, Nebraska, which is only about half an hour away, and so I think he recognized that there was this opportunity to give back to the part of the state that he grew up in.
Yeah, I know after he passed away, it came out, I think he left something like $130 million to of his foundation to, I don't know, it's the University of Nebraska or different charities in Nebraska. So he really paid back the hometown, didn't he?
He definitely did. Yeah, he spread his money around Nebraska pretty well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, again, these chimpanzees. And I've, heard some horrible stories, I guess everybody has, of what they can do. You think they're these, lovable, cuddly, animals who are entertaining, but they can turn on you, and that kind of happened in this story, didn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They have this. I think people have this idea of them as being cute, but they're actually very dangerous animals, especially when they've been in a cage for so long and suddenly have their freedom. When they got loose, they were high on adrenaline. The tranquilizers did not work in slowing them down. And, sadly, the townspeople had very little choice but to kill them. They certainly weren't out there excited to hunt down a chimpanzee, but at that point, the zoo was run by volunteers who were not trained properly. The director was just the guy who owned the auto body shop across the street. I mean, it had fallen into disrepair and poor management, and the locals just had no choice at that point but to keep themselves safe.
Did a lot of people go to the zoo? I mean, did it have a tourist attraction for a while? Or, obviously they didn't make a lot of money with it, but what happened? Yeah,
they never had, a ton of visitors, but they were bringing in, at one point, nearly 20,000 visitors a year, which is, given that it's a town of 81 people, that was really significant. Well, so they were getting busloads of school children from other nearby small towns and communities, and it was a thing that a lot of people, even to this day, I've heard from a ton of people since the book came out saying, I remember that zoo. I loved going there as a kid. I remember the chimpanzee. He was great. So it was really a thing that people had great memories of.
And again, part of your book, which kind of makes it relative to everybody else who has lived in a small type of town, the local officials or government, whatever you want to call them, or other people get involved and makes a mess of everything, right? That doesn't necessarily just happen in Nebraska. Right. It happens everywhere.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Was this, I know you did a lot of research to put this book together. Was that difficult, or how did you get a lot of this information?
Yeah, it took me 10 years to write the book, and that was for a host of reasons. One, I did hundreds of interviews to complete this thing. I talked to, everybody in town, everybody from the small towns around there, but a big primary hurdle in the beginning was that Dick Haskin, the main character in the book, refused to talk to me for the first 8 years that I was working on this. And, it's hard to write a book where the main character isn't cooperating. So I spent those years kind of interviewing people around Dick Haskin, trying to fill in his gap. But after I sold the book, I reached out to him one last time and said, hey, this is kind of your last opportunity to talk to me about your experience. And that's when he finally opened up and gave me some great material. But it also meant I was looking at another rewrite of the book. So it's been a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. Again, if you've never been to Nebraska, but just everybody can kind of relate to something like this in their hometown. And I know you've done some local interviews in Nebraska. I imagine a lot of people are interested there, right? Where you grew up, about this book.
Yeah. The reception in Nebraska has been, really encouraging. The coverage here has been great. And, but one thing I keep saying is that I certainly wouldn't have spent 10 years on a book if I thought that the themes were only relevant to Royal or only relevant to Nebraska. So as you say, it seems relevant to people in small towns everywhere, and hopefully the themes themselves just connect with anybody who's, dealt with human nature broadly.
Yeah. Zoo, Nebraska, The Dismantling of an American Dream is the full title of the book, and we've been talking with Carson Vaughan today. Carson, do you have a website you want to direct people to? They can get more information on the book?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just carsonvaughan.com, and they can also find me on Twitter and Facebook.
Great. And we'll also put a link on our website as well. But Carson, pleasure talking to you, and good luck with the book, and hopefully we can talk to you again. Thanks for being with us.
That'd be great. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you for joining us today on Talk Across America. Please visit our website at dougmilesmedia.com for more great interviews and content. And if you're interested in any of the books we talk about on the program, please click the Amazon link on our website. It helps support the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again real soon here from beautiful Sarasota, Florida.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.